Hi everyone, we're back with Commissioner Wilson during her virtual office hours.
Hi there, I am so sorry if we disappeared for a few. We are trying out some new equipment. We want to make sure that you know that we are doing all of this in-house here, trying to make sure that we get as much information out to you as possible. So, obviously the work of the people is sort of our main focus. We are fortunate enough to have an amazing volunteer helping us with the technology, but as all technology is around me, things go haywire. Something about my brain that sets all technology into spin. So thank you for hanging with us through that and for tuning back in. And we may have to stop at some point again, but don't worry, we will get back around and get information out. If there was a portion of this that either piqued your interest, but there wasn't enough information because of the sound, or you didn't get it, please reach out. Let us finish and fill in the blanks, because we will be able to do that.
Yes, and don't forget, we bought this equipment so that we can start going out in the community. And Commissioner Wilson just shared a bunch of COVID-19 updates. So as soon as everybody's vaccinated and we've hit that 78% herd immunity, we really hope to get the commissioner out in the community to do meet and greets.
Yes, and I if you were in here for the first part of this and you were able to hear, I'm going to say it just one more time. Go in and pre-register on the CDR website, OCFL, and make sure that that we've got you in there so that when the portal opens for 40 and up, you can go ahead and make your appointment. If you have a pre-existing health condition, a condition that puts you in a particular vulnerability, there's form available for you to take to your doctor's office. And then all ages of teachers, firefighters, and healthcare workers are all good to go. Make your appointment and go, or head to one of the FEMA locations, ocfl.net. There's every bit of the information on there for all the COVID resources.
I can't believe how few questions we do get about it, so feel free to email district1@ocfl.net. There's no question too big or too small. We haven't received that many, just mostly about when people who are less mobile are going to have the firefighters coming into those communities.
That's going to happen. The firefighters are going to get out into the communities. You're going to see more and more. Now that the inventory is ramped up, you're going to see more and more community outreach to make sure that our most vulnerable or least likely to travel communities are also getting visits from emergency services to make sure that the vaccines are getting to them. I know there's been a lot of dialogue about making sure community leaders are engaged in some of our communities where they really are the source of communication. Not everybody has Wi-Fi. Not everybody has the opportunity to get on a smartphone and make their appointment. We're not going to forget about those people, and I want to make sure that we're being really clear that as that inventory ramps up, there are going to be more and more opportunities to come to people where they are.
Yes. So right before we took a small break, we were talking about the Vision 2050 survey and how important it is for people who want to make their voices heard in the community to go to ocfl.net/Vision 2050 to fill out the survey.
Yes, please. Please, Vision 2050. You have a chance to put your opinion, your voice, your thoughts into what is going to be the comprehensive plan for the future for Orange County. And the people that I talk to all across District 1 and the county, and their frustrations with what they feel has really either been a lack of foresight or judgment in growth, or just like you said, the planning part of this, where what's it going to look like in 10, 15 years. I have an expiration date in this office, but I want to make sure that while I'm here, that we're trying to put everything we can into place to get your voice in part of our comprehensive plans.
Yes.
So that what your intent for how the county is going to look in the years to come is part of what the actual plans look like moving forward, and that's Vision 2050.
Yeah, and so to segue into our next conversation, and it's actually tied to this, right? You were saying before we took a break that a lot of communities usually will have certain infrastructure in place as they're being developed typically. And I think back when the state used to audit or review comprehensive plans, they would make sure that things like a post office or a hospital or what have you are all inside of the community as it's getting developed, as well as a school. Well, one major challenge that we've had is Horizon West.
Well, the cohesion. So,
Yeah.
so yes, there used to be, prior to Rick Scott, there was a sort of Florida, the state of Florida had some oversight in the way that they were controlling what you would consider sprawl, which is providing, your housing inventory far away from your places of employment or your schools, and then not really considering the connectivity of those places. And one of the things that is really fundamental to good planning is understanding that if you have a center that is your employment center, your education center, that everything you do for housing should be based on that center, and the density, the highest density, you consider going inside of that. So when you hear the word urban boundary, which I think is thrown around quite a bit without any real understanding of what that is, an urban boundary traditionally was a set point on the map where past that the county didn't provide services such as water, sewer, and it wasn't considered part of the urban planning that would go with the proximity to your employment centers and your schools. Horizon West, when it was devised, this was when we had citrus farms in West Orange County, really from top to bottom in West Orange County, there were citrus farms that we had a series of freezes. What happened from there to where we are now is somewhat up for debate, depending on who you speak to about the original documents. But the idea, I think, was at the time to make the best use of what was that citrus land. And so the idea of having a work, live, play here planned development was the really on the paper the plan for Horizon West. What you hear me talking about in my frustration week in and week out in some of the things that come in front of us is the deviation from that plan at the bequest of developers who don't really care how far your kids are from their school or how much open space they're leaving you once they pull out of town. So one of the things that they incorporated really in talking about this new urbanism and the idea of this work here, play here, and making sure that there's connectivity and that there are trails and biking paths and all those things, we can put those in a plan, but then we have to enforce that. And so trying to scrutinize those things, every 2 weeks, trying to make sure that the people of Horizon West haven't been severed from the things that provide a good quality of life, the reasons why they moved there, and then making sure that moving forward we haven't done anything to prevent what we need in order to have the widest sidewalks we can get into a location, designated bike lanes, roundabouts instead of 6 laned roads where you can never get across with a stroller or on your bike in a light cycle. And so that comes down to really looking in very close detail at plans that are being proposed in front of the Board of County Commissioners. Before it ever gets to us, it does go through other divisions. And so part of what we've really been trying to do here is learning at what point during that development process is the most appropriate to make sure that they are not severing people from connectivity, making sure that they are not overburdening the school to a point, and making sure that there are the things that were promised in the comprehensive plan haven't been waved away.
Yep. And one of the major things that I know has been a little bit of a challenge this particular week has been moving forward with the library in Horizon West.
Horizon West friends. So this is a call to action. We'll continue to do it. This will be a separate post as well. Been so grateful to Orange County Library system is its own entity, and we are so fortunate they have their own taxing system, so they are able to get their revenue source without having to wrestle with any other departments, which is really a great thing. And the library is so important to all of us in our quality of life and the ability we all have to access everything the library has to offer. Horizon West has grown faster than any other area in Orange County and was at the top of their list in where a next branch should be. It is a pretty big distance from Horizon West to the next closest branch. That was measured. The current population of Horizon West was documented, measured, and then a projected growth based on entitlements was put into a spreadsheet and brought to the board, the OCLS, the Orange County Library Board of Trustees. Fabulous group of people who are giving their time to determine what things should take priority and what direction the library goes and what programs are coming up on the horizon. And one of the many difficult tasks that they have to grapple with is in what order do we build the next branch? And they cannot do concurrent branches. It has to happen consecutively because of the funding mechanism. So there has to be an order to which branch comes next and then which branch after that. Horizon West, as I took office, was the one that had been voted on by the board because of the population, because of the, they located a piece of property that was going to be a very affordable piece of property, and actually sounds like a beautiful place to have a library, something that's going to be really close to the community park. Well, you know, as all great plans, there has to be a little bit of a wrench thrown in, and I received a call, I don't know, would it be a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago now, that there was some concern or debate that Horizon West was losing its priority. And when I checked with the Board of Trustees, they felt very confident that the reasoning behind their vote and prioritizing Horizon West was still in place, that hadn't changed. That the only thing that had changed was that the piece of property that they located and agreed upon in the Horizon West area is a piece of property that is co-owned between Orange County and the city of Orlando. And lo and behold, the city of Orlando wants to make a branch in the Lake Nona area the priority over the Horizon West area, and I guess in no certain terms indicated that they were going to hold up the land transfer, the land purchase, in order to be able to get that Lake Nona branch prioritized over the Horizon West branch. So what I'm going to tell you about this is that the Board of Trustees who voted to prioritize Horizon West, their priorities haven't changed. We went to the last meeting last week, and their priorities have stayed the same. The projected growth of Horizon West justifies it. The distance to the next branch justifies it. There's a beautiful piece of property that's already been located. There's studies, a survey going on, hopefully right now, that will continue to put that particular piece of property in position for development. The only thing that has changed is that the city of Orlando, that leadership there, including a Commissioner Gray, who I don't know personally, and I'm just going to call him out because he was at the public meeting, stating that he believed that Nona was more important than Horizon West. Sort of, I felt like, didn't take into consideration that these decisions were made by an independent board for your benefit, for the benefit of the residents, based on facts, based on the population size, based on the available property and how quickly they can move on it. So that board, as an independent board, I felt like did a really good job of clarifying what their reasoning was and how they needed to move forward. And I come to you now, if you're a Horizon West resident, if you're an Orange County resident, if you are just interested in fair and even distribution of our branches, that please tune in to the next library board meeting, their Board of Trustees. There's a public comment period, and at the last meeting there were several people there that were brought in, I believe, by the city from Lake Nona, and one of the things they said was, well, there's never anyone here from the Horizon West area, from West Orange County, and I represented our side of the county, the west side, and I said that's an unfair judgment, knowing that they believed this was done, that this process was complete, this vote had happened, and they have confidence that when an independent library board votes a certain way, that they don't need to check up on that process. And what I've found out is that, unfortunately, we do still need your engagement. We still need you to give public comment We're also going to put in the thread and in another post ways that you can reach out to the library board to just encourage them that Horizon West is anticipating this branch and is looking forward to this, and that we do appreciate that they prioritize Horizon West, even if we haven't had to come to their meetings with, you know, pitchforks in hand, because we knew that they'd already made that decision.
Yep.
I don't know what's going on in closed offices in the city of Orlando. I know that Tavistock was in on this deal, and I'm not going to hide that because it was very public. At the meeting that we went to, Tavistock drove the library director to some various sites, and I believe offered up some property at market value, which to me wasn't any great lure, and it actually to me felt a little bit like profiteering, but that's not my business. I, as your representative, am there to make sure that when an independent board like the library system makes a decision for you, that I can help facilitate that in any way possible, and that I can help be your advocate in front of them to make sure this project happens. So that's where we are. We're going to continue to give you updates on it. My conversations with the Board of Trustees, they haven't deterred from their plan. But every other indication is that the City of Orlando, Lake Nona, the commissioner there, Commissioner Gray, is trying very, very hard to keep the Horizon West branch from happening. So there's even been indication that somehow the projected population numbers were fudged. So, you know, I'm not going to let that go. I know that libraries shouldn't be controversial, but I'm going to fight to keep that branch coming to Horizon West. I think it will be a beautiful attribute to a beautiful area. I could visualize where it was going to be next to the community park, and I think we will continue to keep that dialogue until they break ground, until we see them breaking ground.
Yeah, I think really the biggest argument that they're having is what the land will cost over there in Lake Nona by the time they get to that 5 to 9 year period when they will have the opportunity to build. Because they can't do two at the same time, Horizon West will probably have their library in the next 4 to 5 years, and then they can start a Lake Nona branch in that 6 to 9 year time frame, which means what is the property value going to be? That's the argument. But there's so many partners
and
that
I want
we
to tell
can
you,
work with.
And I understand that argument. I understand that but property values are going up in both of these populations for the very reason that they need branches of a library. The property values are going up because the population is going up. When this process started, long before I contemplated running for office, they looked at that.
Yeah.
They looked at all of those things, including where they would be able to secure property right now and where they would be able to expedite the project fastest at the best cost so that they could move on to whatever the next branch was. So they did contemplate all of those things, and I really believe that ultimately any position that can be taken for why they need to lock in a property because of escalating property values in one of those locations is every bit as applicable as the other. And knowing that I think when you set everything else aside, the idea of going to an independent oversight board like the Board of Trustees and sort of manipulating them away from a vote they've already taken. So they will literally have to go rescind that vote in order to project, in order to switch the order of those branches. So, that to me is a little different than negotiations over land. It's a little different than negotiations over where a business would go. What that is it feels a little more, it undermines the purpose of an independent board, which is what the Board of Trustees for the library is. And because they are a taxing district, it should be open, transparent, and people who have an opinion about this or feel important that this is important really have the ability to still participate. And like I said, I really would have sounded the alarm a long time ago if I hadn't gone back and looked at the minutes of these meetings and seen that there was a clear decision already made. So unfortunately, right now, with the sort of hard sell that they're getting on switching that order, we just still need the participation. And I agree with you. Look, property values go up and up. That is the problem, I think, in delaying anything, right? But if we scrap the one that was let's pretend I'm not from out there, and I just look at this as an outsider. Okay,
Yeah.
and I just look at this as an outsider as two potential projects. They can only go in order. They can't happen side by side. The one that already has the most groundwork already done is going to be the obvious choice, just because if time is of the essence for the other one, stalling isn't going to help. So I just feel like I don't have enough political pull outside my small bubble of the people who I know understand my position, and that I'm very transparent, and that I'm very driven to represent the needs and wants of my community, not necessarily any special interest. I don't have any of the push and pull that I've been able to observe in part of this process, in sort of this bigger land use world. And so I do need the public participation still.
Well, not to mention that all the other branches that were potential sites in Lake Nona were 6 miles away from an already existing branch. But we'll move on.
Right.
All right.
You don't want to go with the $1 million an acre over there?
No, thank you. Today we had some real fun because impromptu we had a group of climate activists storm the front yard and start waving their climate signs.
I know there are politicians all over the world that when they hear about a climate strike, climb under their desks. I threw on my flip-flops and ran downstairs.
Yes.
That's what I did. I was like, what? There's a climate strike going on here right now. Let's go.
Yes.
It was so great to go out and, have that sense of unity, sense of purpose, the passion. And I got out there, and who was there but our very own Jeff Benavides.
Jeff Benavides on the mic.
I mean, just holding on to a megaphone. And to me, sometimes looking at the day-to-day part of this, where you just feel like you're fighting so hard to make what we've already voted in as the sustainability plan actually come to life. You think, is this pointless? What am I doing? And then you go down there and you're like, oh my gosh, that's right. This is why we're doing this, because we all agree. Look at the people who are with me, that have my back, that I have their back, that we all know that if we don't do something right now, that we're not going to have anything to fight for in the future. And so it just is such a, and I talk about little kids, just little kids holding posters, and I'm like, this is why, because I want you to have the same opportunities that my grandmother had. And I just think that comes down to being good stewards of our environment, which, if you don't start with climate, the rest of it is moot. So we had a conversation that spun off from that, coming back in and talking about some things that are on the horizon here. And I just think it's going to be really important for us to stay engaged with the young people and the people that are so involved in being vocal advocates, and making sure that what I talk about, bogging me down, that nitty gritty of us in-house holding every department to task, every project to task. We're gonna need community voices and activist voices, and I think about what Jeff does, as he's completely understaffed, and he has this great plan.
No budget, and no checks and balances, right? So I really believe that we're going to get to a place, because we can't just trust that everyone's going to get on board with the plan that he voted on, where we're going to have to make sure that there's a checkpoint at every stage of a department's, ins and outs, that they are including him. Yes.
And including sustainability.
And Jeff is the director of sustainability and resilience that was appointed by the mayor for Orange County.
Right, appointed by the mayor, and then his plan was approved with flying colors, right? It was completely a unanimous and enthusiastic passage.
Yep, and they were like, go figure out how it's going to get done.
Exactly. And so what I've seemed to observe is that we'll go into a meeting planning something in transportation, planning something in a particular taxing district, planning something in, for a capital project, and I'm flipping through all the stuff, and I'm like, well, where's the sustainability component?
It would be really nice if we talked about that.
Listen, we voted on something, and we said that we were going to make sure there was a sustainability component to this.
Yeah. But we can't clone him and have him in every room. I wish, but
we can't. But what we can do, and what we're going to continue to do, and what you can rely on us to do, is to raise the issue and what the obligations are based on that plan, and to raise any other opportunities we have to grow that. So that plan, the initial plan was what he called under the hood, Orange County operations. It sets the example for what we're going to ask the entire community to do. So any opportunity we have. So if we're, working with partner organizations, then we have the opportunity to incorporate whatever our climate initiatives and goals are into that conversation, because we know it was passed as a board. It was passed, the mayor, brought Jeff. So this is the directive that the whole county is moving with. So we have confidence in saying that. I think where we have a lot of opportunity, and this is what today made me think of, is understanding that there's a calendar process to so many things that affect our climate, and that will continue to be, I believe, either opportunities for us to offset our carbon footprint, or for us to continue to add to the problem. And we get a better job of really progressing climate voices if we have additional voices. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure, by looking at a calendar and seeing what's in sort of the long range plans that we think will have a climate impact, and that we think there's an opportunity for us to set an example and to be the example, and to not spread Jeff any thinner. We're going to call on the climate activists that we know are in our corner and that are fighting every day for our planet, and we're going to make sure that is a hand in hand. We have a hand-in-hand opportunity. I always sort of felt like, not always, but I felt like having, come into the office and taken the responsibility, it was sort of a handoff, right? I go from being an activist, and here's this handoff, and it's really not. You got to come with me. It's not, because we see sometimes things that I feel like are obvious bad decisions in what should be an overall decision about using fossil fuels or destroying our carbon sinks. And they say things, and I say they because it's a variety, right? It depends on what that project is. Well, we didn't hear anything from the community. And I'm like, oh, so that's it. Wait a minute. It's because I thought once I took this, I could say, no, but this is what they want.
Yeah.
I'm telling you what they want. And that doesn't necessarily get me there.
No.
It's one vote. A lot of times it's an up or down vote.
Yeah, and they put that plexiglass around you so that when you explode, it doesn't go everywhere. Right. It's it's like, what? Like, I thought that your voice would have much more.
And I have said in, I don't know, probably of all the BCCs that I've attended, there's probably been one that I omitted the words, oh my gosh, sustainability isn't just a word.
Yeah, you gotta add it.
We love the word, but if you're not actually looking, when you look at a transportation plan, or this next agenda, there's this proposed workshop on a roadway, and there's a roadway that has failed and it needs some updating, and I'm looking through it and I'm like, what? We've talked about this. We've agreed to this. There should be a component that discusses how this is going to be either, carbon neutral or put us in a better position. And when I say that, I'm, have we made room for what may be, some electrical, something that is going to be a complete alternative to our gas vehicles? Have we made sure to put a barrier between a bicyclist and the road? None of those things were in there. I'm looking, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like every other ugly road in Orange County.
Yeah, we have
the opportunity. We're there, looking at a multi-million-dollar project. Even the light versus roundabout thing for me is a no-brainer. You know what happens when a hurricane comes through and knocks out all our lights at the roundabouts? You know what happens?
You still go roundabout.
Nothing. They work. It's incredible. We don't need power. We don't need electricity. It can be high winds. and they work.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like the most no-brainer sustainability thing in the world to look at every intersection where it may be possible. And anytime we're putting millions of dollars into a road, got to ask the question, and it's nowhere addressed in there, nowhere. So yeah, I'm going to keep asking, but once again,
we need you to show up to those BCCs, and you can always email district1@ocfl.net if you're curious about anything you, an environmentalist, would need to know in order to make your voice heard, or what the process is like.
Yeah, and sometimes it doesn't have to even be showing up. And I know there's something very daunting for a lot of people who I especially think are, I have some really great friends who are more scientific in their reasoning, that come up with these really great things that I think, well, this needs to be incorporated in the discussion. It's okay if that comment is made by email or dialogued by phone calls to other other leaders wherever you are, but it is an important thing to reach out in whatever way you're most comfortable in doing that.
So just a quick shout out to the Fridays for Future Orlando group who helped put that together. They partner hand in hand with Ideas for Us Orlando. Shout out to them.
It was so good.
So good. Other groups that attended: Central Florida Jobs with Justice, incredible leaders that really advocate for climate justice and resiliency programs for our most vulnerable communities, which just so happen to typically almost always be our minority communities. Moms Clean Air Force,
I love that.
0 Hour, and Florida Rising. Just thank you so much for just being there and making your voices heard.
Like, it just gave me chills.
Yeah,
It gave me chills. It was just really good to see you all, and I am just it gives that extra little fuel to my fire.
Yeah, 2 quick sustainability updates since Jeff, we want to make like a huge shout out to Jeff and Lori from the Sustainability and Resilience Department. Backyard chickens are now under review for having some permitting.
Yeah, I think there's this really great push right now to make sure that if people can be sufficient in their food, in being able to grow and feed themselves right there where they live, and they have the space to do it, that we should provide the legal means for them to do that. And it hasn't been in Orange County. There are municipalities in Orange County that allow it, so this will get us, we have to have another workshop, and then it will go down into the language. It looks like it's a fairly compatible ordinance, or it will be, hopefully, with some of the municipalities that are already the existing municipalities that allow permitting or permit backyard chickens. I should say hens, right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Because we're not going to let the roosters wake up the whole neighborhood.
We got so many emails of people. I have so much hope, and I told everybody who sent an email about supporting the backyard chicken thing to please send us pictures, because we need some baby chick photos to look at.
Yes.
Get us through the day. So really excited. If you have any questions about like how to get a permit or what
that process is going to look, we're not there yet, but we can at least kind of give you what the overview was from that presentation.
Yes.
And they did a great job of showing us the comparison to what the Orange County's ordinance will probably look like in comparison to the other municipalities, so that we aren't, because I know that at least out in District 1, you can walk across the ditch and your Winter Garden, unincorporated Orange County, Ocoee, and so looking at some of those differences, I think is helpful for people.
Yes, so that's awesome. Last point I wanted to make, because we're already a little over time, and I wanted to see if there's any questions.
We could do a speed round.
We could do a speed round. Metroplan Orlando, Commissioner, you specifically asked after meeting with them to meet with the sustainability team, and the conversations that were had during that meeting about fundraising for better, like you said, more technological advancements so that Orlando can be a hub of technology.
How great would that be? We become the driver. We become the example of how being a sustainable community creates more jobs and creates a better environment, not just health-wise, but economically, and because of that, the educational opportunities. To me, connecting those pieces, Metroplan Orlando is our transportation cooperative. So it's a multi municipality and locality cooperative, and to bring in our county sustainability chief and get them connected so that we're, getting sort of that, once again, that plan branching up and out is tremendous. So
yeah, because when you set the example by having the financial ability to put in more electric charging stations and more, traffic lights that are able to send out the sensors needed for automatic self-driving cars to be able to have that infrastructure in place. If we collaborated and went after that funding, Orlando would be a hub for those tech companies who are innovating those vehicles and those manufacturers to want to get their facilities here because the infrastructure is already there.
That's right.
So it just then jobs and then more opportunities.
And I think it's important to always make that connection, because I think sometimes the criticism for activists who are trying to express, the inherent need for really offsetting that carbon footprint is, well, what's that going to do about our economy? What's that going to do? Well, I think it's the exact opposite. I think really being a technology hub for sustainable energy solutions is such an exciting idea. And I love the idea of having some of those young people go to school right here to study some of those solutions, and then be the CEOs of the future of companies that have driven, purely green and sustainable transportation for our entire Central Florida area.
Yes, 100%. Ernest, do we have any questions from the audience? No? Okay, so maybe a quick speed round.
Okay, speed round.
You ready for this? So, number one thing that I have to say, you are just such a voice that I hear you bring this up at least 4 times a week. Deforestation of our rural areas and seeing that beautiful charm of like a rural settlement just slowly get chipped away.
Well, it goes back to 2050, and I want everybody to pipe in on this, because it's absurd to me that somebody at some point in our comprehensive planning thought it was okay to designate a rural settlement and then allow everything around it to get higher density, where there's really no ingress or egress from that rural settlement without going through high density. And I don't hate high density, it just needs to be in the right place. And guess what? Surrounding a rural settlement isn't it. We talked to people this week in the Go Through Rural Settlement that said that their roads are like these high-speed catapults.
Yeah.
And if you look at a map, you understand why. It's because our comprehensive plan allowed that to happen.
Yeah.
So we need that Vision 2050 feedback. We are working really closely with them to try to do what we promised them. And I say we, I mean the people who allowed them to become or protected that rural settlement. We're going to try really make sure that we're getting those speeds down through there. It sounds like there were some pretty important wildlife crossings that we are hoping to address in that area. We are actively pursuing finding answers from the DOT on their water issues, and we've got our eye on a development that was put into place. The motion started back in 2015, 2016. The community was very involved then, and we're going to be involved now to try to make sure that what was discussed then is either brought to fruition in the way that it was discussed, or that whoever is in the process of doing the building now communicates very clearly straight to those residents.
Yes, that's the Fire Creek property that you talked about in the last virtual office hour meeting that we had.
Yeah, it just it hurt me when I came around the corner and saw the clear cutting for that. It sounded like after this meeting that there were plans to have protected some of the old growth and some of the buffers that we don't know if it was a violation yet. We've certainly alerted EPD, and they were very amenable to going and finding out if that was a violation. So you'll hear back from us on that. If it is a violation, then what I want to make sure of is that the community that was impacted by that violation then gets to have some input in the replacement that should go there. And I think that there's so much more discussion that we could do, not in the speed round, about how when those violations happen. I think they happen a lot just because it's cheaper to do that than to follow what is in the code as far as the canopy and tree protection. And at the end of the day, then what they do is they throw a couple of bucks into this tree fund that nobody who lives there and gets impacted by that clear cutting ever gets to see the benefit of. So we are aggressively pursuing some tree justice.
And you also, we saw a petition from Avalon Rural Settlement.
Yes, and I'm going to reach back out to let them know what my communication has been with all the departments that are involved in road planning here in Orange County. I also want to really encourage the people in Avalon Rural Settlement to reach out to their Lake County, to my counterpart in Lake County, and make sure that the dialogue that we're having, that you're also making sure that he's aware. I know that he may not be as receptive, but they still have to have public comment at their meetings. There still has to be an approval. I believe it's coming up in May. I will remind you when that approval is coming up, and this is for the development that would affect sort of the backside. That I believe the road that was of concern was Phil C. Peters on one end, Marsh is on the top, and I am keeping my eye very closely on that. I've addressed very specifically with our planning division here why we are able to, when it says in our comprehensive plan that there should be a certain amount of protections put in place around rural settlements, why we are not able to have any input in some of the abutting density. So we will continue to push that. I'm going to share some of those emails because I think transparency will always be the best thing. So I don't mind sharing any of the dialogue I have about what my concerns are in some of those plans.
With a lot of rural areas, sometimes there's a lot of homeless camps. So another thing that in this speed round we talked about last time.
It's the best segue ever.
Yeah, I was trying there.
It was a really good segue. And what she means, what we're talking about, and
yes.
this is a very District 1 issue that I think my more urban counterparts have are grappling with also. A lot of displaced people right now, a lot of people who are having housing crises as far as, the availability of truly affordable housing. And, if I was housing challenged right now, I would also set up a tent somewhere in the woods and hope that nobody would notice me because we have some really beautiful woods. We have some really beautiful areas. And I think the more development we have, the more we realize that right in plain sight, we have people who don't have homes that have just been sheltering wherever they can. And, we are, one of the things that we did this week and it was a really great meeting, and I think we're going to have some opportunities to make sure that there's wraparound services and ways to lift people up and out of some of those situations in the long term. But we did get to meet with the Salvation Army captain here in Orlando, who had some thoughts and ideas, and then showed us what some of their services included. I think I'm always very attracted to those ones that include the treatment component for mental health and substance abuse, because once we get that into place, then we can talk about training and job applications. And sometimes it's really those nuts and bolts things. Once again, this isn't rocket science. This is, getting some, additional help and getting a Florida ID and some forms filled out so that we have an enrollment in a training program that then can put us in a position to apply for a rent, for housing. So, it's really putting, I think, and I don't think government has all the answers. And I know I sound like a conservative when I say that, but that's okay. You know me, I'm a little bit like, I think we have to take all in. And I think part of that is the public-private partnership that's going to be really important in District 1 in this situation. Now, Matthews Hope does a great job, and Pastor Scott works tirelessly and has a really great handle on understanding that whole, that it's not about putting a pillow under their head and a roof over them. It's about making sure that if there's a rent put into place, that is there the training to keep the job, to keep the rent there? If there's substance abuse that is the underlying cause, have we addressed that to make sure that they're not going to become homeless again in 3 months because of a relapse? And so
yes, oh my goodness, actually Ernest here, who's a big movie buff, brought up an example that I never thought about, and I'm extraordinarily empathetic. I try to put myself in other people's shoes, but there's this movie out right now called Nomad's Land, and it talks about a homeless vet who has such severe PTSD that when he's in the city, all the noises are so intensified from the PTSD that literally living in the city is like hearing gunshots all the time, and the trauma is just too severe to be able to deal with the clamoring and the bustling of being in an urban area. We would never know that because we struggle with our own mental health issues and our own struggles. Everybody has struggles. But when you automatically blanket a stereotype on a homeless person without fully comprehending what they're
Everybody
battling,
has a story.
You don't know that housing first might not be the answer.
That's right.
You might need wraparound services to treat that PTSD before you could adequately give them what they need to really thrive in a home.
That's right.
Otherwise, you could put them in the home and they just act the same before because they are struggling with trauma.
The underlying issue was the inability to function in a way that has some structure, right? Where you then in that you can care for self. So those wraparound services, and from day one, it was Pastor Scott at Matthew's Hope. His number one concern was the lack of wraparound services because he said, that and this makes so much sense that even providing daycare,
which I just daycare, why didn't I think of that? You
can't go to a job interview if you don't have somebody watching your kids. And
an ID.
And as somebody who was very particular about leaving my children with people, I was fortunate and blessed enough to have friends, family, and resources to allow someone else to watch my kids so I could go to interviews. But if you're not that person, then what is the cost to us to try to figure out how to help with that so that you can then lift yourself? So that to me, that's that. Looking forward to really finding ways that we're spending and using the resources on this end, on the front end, so we're not paying 15 times more on the back end, which is what we look at day in and day out, is the cost of not looking for preventative services, wraparound services, mental health services, and making sure that we're good job training, good
affordable housing.
So if it matches, right, we can get you trained, we can get you the job, but if whatever that median or average income is doesn't match with anything that's on the market, then you're still not going to be able to provide for your family.
Well, that last point segues into the iDrive CRA. Affordable housing. I know it's lightning round. I know our lightning
round is not.
We do have one question too, but I wanted to.
So very quickly, we're gonna talk about this again. We'll put it. Let's go ahead and jot down now. We'll do it on next Fridays as a more in-depth, because it ends up being there wasn't a vote. There was a work session, which means that we're going to come back again and talk about it again. And I think this was a very controversial item. The CRA, just for everybody's refresher, is Community Redevelopment Act or Association. What happens is it's a statute that frames a way to tax on an incremental financing for property taxes that can then be kind of channeled in to something that's considered blight in a community. There are CRAs used in many, many different parts of this area and the state. Downtown Winter Garden is an example. The city of Orlando actually has 2. Unincorporated Orange County has 2. Actually, the city of Orlando may have more than 2. I may have short of them. Either way, as a county, we have 2, the OBT CRA and the iDrive CRA. The reason why the iDrive CRA becomes a very important discussion point and a very legitimate point of interaction for many community leaders and for the community is because the iDrive, as you know, area is largely commercial. It's many private businesses, some small businesses, some bigger businesses, some large resorts, some smaller retail, restaurants, lots of restaurants. And there was a CRA put in place in the 90s that had very specific, identifiable, what they consider transportation issues of blight that were identified, and then that tax money from the TIF, is what you call it, you hear it, gets channeled into fixing some of that blight. Well, we are now wrapping up what is the timeline for the original iDrive CRA. So the conversation continues about whether or not it's appropriate to extend that CRA. We still have time within this CRA, and we still have finances that are still within the funnel of the current CRA. So projects that are needed in that area that were already identified and earmarked will be completed. There's no threat to anything that was earmarked. The controversial project that you may remember from before I was elected, before the turn of the new year, was the what they called the Universal Road Partnership, or Kirkman Extension, which was a partnership with Universal Studios to put road through an area in the iDrive corridor and pay for it in part through the CRA. And legitimately, it's a concern to many people that if we are funneling money from our general fund into anywhere, that we need to have a fully vetted process and reasoning and include everybody who's impacted. And my position has always been, and will continue to be, that I am a independent thinker, I'm a fact finder, I'm a researcher, and I really like to dig into the details. And I'm going to do the best thing I can for the most people I can who have relied on me for that, right? They hired me, the people hired me, the residents of Orange County. And so, there's nothing in front of us for a vote coming up. There are, grave concerns about whether or not the voices of the tourist workers, the people who are the backbone, heart and soul of all of those businesses down there, if they were heard. And so, a very important topic at the last BCC meeting was whether or not there was a survey to employees of iDrive businesses and what their feedback was. And we did hear from some of the workers' representatives who said that they felt like the survey was a push-pull survey. And what that means is, here's my idea, do you like it? Right? That's a push-pull.
Like, is that my only option?
Yeah, here's my idea, do you like it? It doesn't.
What about my idea?
They felt like it didn't capture what would be the crux of a priority, or the issues that some of the kind of workforce issues that need to be addressed. Now, in fairness to staff who presented that survey, it was because they're directed by the BCC to look at certain things, and they felt like the way to do that was to present those in a survey form. I think there's more than one way to take a bite at this apple, and I think that in order to get that full picture, that we continue to have that dialogue. So I've asked for some of the employee representatives to stay in touch with me. I've asked our staff to reach out to the Center Plate people, to some of the other big labor groups in that area, to make sure that we are in touch and that we are getting all of the information in that we need to get in. I think it's going to be the part that I find the hardest for me to get over as the District 1 representative is if you look at the way the line runs, and no one's been able to explain to me why it was cut like this. Williamsburg, which is right there, there's just like this cut, and it goes along the road there. So you literally cut out the residences to the south. So you don't end up with any of these residences that you're looking at. And usually, typically, a CRA will include some community component where there are people who reside there. So the one that is included in the CRA boundary is Tangelo Park. And so the good part of this is we've really been able to get some information about what Tangelo Park needs. Why those things weren't addressed in the original CRA is a debate for a different board of county commissioners. And I get a little angry when I think about these people from Tangelo Park coming out at their because of their decrepit community center and saying, wait a minute, we devised of a CRA that you were in on the last time. How did this not get resolved? But hopefully, in either whatever we can budget for in the current CRA, or if there is further discussions, the next one, there is definitely an appetite within the commission, the government that's in place right now, to make sure that those community centers are taken care of and that the Tangelo Park people are heard. So that's sort of where I am, and I don't know. Had you heard from anybody else, constituent service wise?
No, I think it's a little confusing to wrap your mind around unless you're in it, unless you're with the workers. But now that you've broken it down, I can see how we need this to be on people's radar because it is so important, even though it is hard to understand sometimes.
Yeah, and I think also there was a misconception. Well, it's not even a misconception. There was misstatements made at some point along the way, and it may have been just a misunderstanding about the structure, that somehow the CRA was dictated to the county from the state, that what we used it on was dictated, and that's not the case. It is absolutely within the purview of the county commission, the mayor, and with the help of staff sculpting this, which is what they're doing. They're trying to come back and give ideas based on stakeholder input. It is absolutely decisions that are made at the county level. So if you've tuned into any of those meetings, you've heard me ask everybody that I think I need to publicly, so it goes on the record. Now, this is a decision by the county commission, correct? Mm-hmm. And typically the administrator who sits next to me says, yes. And then there's a caveat, which is, but it needs to be written into the CRA, part of the plan. It can't be a constantly adaptive budget item. So that's the difference there. But it's not dictated to us by the state of Florida. The parameters that are dictated to us by the state of Florida are that there has to be geographical bounds, that it's identified as a specific taxing structure. There's some other constraints, but it's not about what the actual funding goes to is in the means of, what are we identifying as blight? So if we're looking at transportation issues, if we're looking at housing issues, those can all be in play.
Well, you made it through the speed round. You made it
Not
through. I'm
super
so
speedy.
sorry that we went over, but you just poured so much out of that brain of yours. I'm always fascinated by how much you know because you retain information very well.
She's very kind to me because I don't know, sometimes I feel like I'm so thank you for tuning in and listening.
Yes.
Thank you for asking. And
of course, we have one question, right?
Yeah, we have one quick question that got lost in the other broadcast, part one, the other video. Mike Kamen says, how do we get lines added to stop signs at Waterley Phase 2?
That one would have to be an email, I think.
Yeah, email us very specifically where it is,
Yes.
and just do a quick bullet point on the description of what's needed, and we can make sure to get it to
we rely on staff.
Yeah,
a lot of questions like that.
And we've had they've been very responsive, and especially if it's something that we know is a safety issue, we now have even more than one way to kind of sort of elevate that. So if you could email us at district1@ocfl.net, and I think we can make sure to get that to the right people, or give us a call. I think there's obviously we can do it Monday, but the stop signs in some of those newer areas, I know, and I understand that there's still things that are slated to go in that I'm afraid are coming too slow. So let me know if we need something to address as far as with the sheriff's department in the meantime.
Yeah. So Commissioner, it's Friday. We have the weekend. Do you have any weekend plans?
I am so lame because I'm going to tell you that my parents got vaccinated a couple weeks ago. So I'm hoping to maybe meet them outside somewhere. Mom, Dad, if you're watching,
and
we have a little Mom, Dad date.
Yes.
Not a hug yet because I'm still not there. Just in case
you're not
I'm
vaccinated yet.
not
That's
there,
right.
but at the very least, we'll be.
I can't wait for hugs.
I know. And then, weekends always end up being our catch-up time. I don't know if you all are the same. It's like it's a time to make sure that all those little things that don't get done during the week get done. There is a rally that I looked into a Sunday for the manatees that have been so tragically. We've had this horrible manatee die off. I'm going to call it manatee murder as a result of what looks like nutritional deprivation in on the East Coast. So maybe we can share that information for anybody that's interested. To me, FWC, I know that they are poorly funded by the state of Florida, but they haven't done any autopsies. There hasn't been any investigations into what the cause is. So it's been this very slow reaction to what looks like catastrophic manatee deaths. So,
Well-
and I don't mean to end this on a sad note, but I'm
Well,
thinking
we'll
about
share.
going out there on Sunday and trying to at least be around some other folks that care and seeing if anybody knows of any other angles that we can take to try to help elevate that as an issue.
Well, thank you for all your hard work, because I feel like even though there are some catastrophic things happening in terms of our water quality, I sleep better at night knowing that you're in the seat that you're in, because you are every BCC bringing up these points of urban sprawl and deforestation and water quality to every meeting.
Well, I think, you talked about taking the show on the road and doing our Facebook Lives out. I think we should take it out and see if they will let us, pop into. I loved the day that we went to the water treatment plant. I think people need to know what that looks like, because the reality of it is we are running out of groundwater, which means that we better trust the science of making water clean again.
Yeah, we're gonna have to.
There's a handful of options, right? We've got reverse osmosis, we've got desalinization, but we're running out of the groundwater that we've relied on. So it is something, and I don't mean to be doom and gloom, because I think that there are solutions, but I think we'll have to work together, and maybe taking that out and talking to some of the brilliant people in water treatment would be kind of cool to do. I think even doing maybe a springs check-in with it might be kind of cool. I know that people, sometimes there's a disconnect between who they elect at the state level and what they think is important.
Yes.
And, the water issues that we are sometimes smacked down on fixing here is because of who you've elected for our state leadership. And really, when you look at the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, that comes from our governor. So you need to point right back at him if there's if you have real concerns about what's happening to our manatees
Right.
and our water.
Any sign-off messages you'd like to tell the constituents of District 1?
Oh, just thank you. Library, Horizon West, I need you all if you're tuning into any part of this. Stay tuned. Get online to check out the COVID vaccine updates so that you can get yours as soon as you can.
Yay.
right,
Thank you
that's
so
it.
much. Have a great weekend, everyone.